Hello and welcome back, adventurers. This is Captain TTRPG, and today we're talking about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Welcome back, adventurers. With the guide out of the way, we are going to do our usual thing here and rank the subclasses for the commander. But what makes up a commander subclass? Well, similar to the exemplar, and there are several other classes like this, it is kind of a build your own subclass kind of case. In this case, the subclass is really your folio. This is the set of tactics that you put together out of the available ones for your level and level of training and expertise, but it doesn't quite seem right to rank all of the tactics against each other. And that's because the tactics available at level 1 are nowhere near the power level that the ones at level 15, Legendary, are. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to rank each one, but each tactic will be ranked against the other tactics in its own category. The categories are mobility, offensive, both of those are level 1, then expert, master, and finally legendary. So what are we going to look for to rank these? Well, there's going to be quite a few factors that we try to take into account here. Before we get into this, though, it's really important for me to say that while I'm going to try to be as objective as I can be and try to look at this holistically, any of these tactics can be S tier for the right group that wants to use them in a certain way. I'm trying to think as generically as possible, bring out what I think are challenges with them, but if you've got the right team that likes to do the right type of actions, any of these can be fantastic. There are no complete failures in my mind. However, some of them might receive Ds or Ss because of how I look at things and how I evaluate what I think of might be like an average group makeup or a diverse team setup. Regardless, what types of things I'm going to look at? Well, we've got things like how many of your squad mates or allies is this actually going to affect? How many actions of your own, the commander, does it take to trigger it? Does it have application inside and outside of combat? How many free actions does it provide? What reactions does it take? Basically, what kind of action compression are you going to get out of this? And then how common are the situations going to come up that this might actually apply to? So these are some of the things I'm going to look at, but I am going to put up on screen how I'm going to actually rank them from S to D and adhere to this the best I can, but it's not going to be perfect. By all means, point it out to me in the comments. It'll only help me learn. An S tactic is one that you could easily make use of turn after turn, almost regardless of team makeup. It will feel useful and it won't take much away from what your ally or allies normally provide and what they liked to do on their turn. When used, it definitely won't be ignored by your ally, because remember, tactics don't have to be used. You can command it and they can just ignore it. An S should never be ignored. It has use in combat for sure. It could have use out of combat. That's not necessarily that critical, not a ton do, but it has to have application in combat to land here. For an A, this is solid in many cases. Even if occasionally it won't feel like the absolute best choice, it'll feel good a lot of the time. Sometimes it will affect the entire party, or if only a small set, it'll provide something so valuable that there's no way they're going to deny it. It may also provide a ton of action compression because that does actually matter. B, this is a tactic that has its uses, but they won't come up round after round, but they're probably coming up every combat at least, or an option every combat. They could be out of combat only and be a B, but that means they have to be very strong in those out of combat situations, and they should provide some sort of action compression, even if it may not be a lot. For C, these likely won't come up, even if they are options. You might have them in your folio, but it might be really hard to want to prepare them because you're just not sure if they're ever going to come up. Out of combat tactics that basically have no combat activity and maybe wouldn't even be used out of combat very often could land here as well. And D, these are tactics that you might just want to avoid. They just may never come up because the situation is so unlikely, or what they offer to like complete the entire tactic might be so challenging because of saves and situations that have to all trigger in the right order that it might just be too painful to actually use this. Or it could just be that whatever they're giving you isn't enough to justify using any actions on. With all that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the tactics, starting with our level 1 mobility tactics. Remember, it's just against each other. So if like a mobility tactic gets an S, it doesn't mean that it's better than every other tactic at like the expert level. right? These are just ranked against each other to help you choose at the various levels what might be useful to you. Defensive Retreat takes 2 actions to use. It affects all squad mates in your aura. When you use it, all allies can step up to 3 times as a free action. You must move away from at least 1 creature that they can see, and they have to move closer to you, right? They're moving away. I guess they don't have to go closer to you, but they probably will. They're moving away from creatures. They can only move toward a creature if that is the only way to move away from closer creatures. This is a good way to get allies either back near you or at least away from harm. This is probably going to affect allies that, casters and ranged fighters that want to get away more than melee fighters who might want to be up close, so they may not want to take advantage of this. This is pretty much exclusively a combat tactic, because why would you use this out of combat? But that's fine. A lot of them are. I just want to mention it one time. You'll notice that plenty of these are combat only. That's totally fine. The fact that it's 2 actions isn't a small cost, as most are 1 or 2 actions, but at least you still have a free action to do something with, and it does affect everybody. So while it may not be a game changer, I do think it can be helpful. It can help your allies stay safe. With that, I do think they would take advantage of this. So yeah, I'm going to give this a solid B. Oh, and keep in mind, this was free actions only, so it didn't actually use any reactions from your allies, and that does definitely matter. Gather to Me, 1 action. This affects all squad mates, and this can be squad mates outside of your aura. In this case, they just have to be able to see or hear you. All allies can use their reaction to stride, but they must end either in your aura or as close to your aura as they can get if they were outside of your aura. So this is similar to the last one, but this is about positioning your team kind of ready to attack rather than getting them out of harm, I think, most of the time. Collecting them up to take actions against enemies is probably more the use here. Because it's very similar, there are differences worth pointing out. This uses a reaction rather than giving them free actions. But this is one that even your melee allies are probably going to want to use, because it means they can reposition themselves closer to enemies, and it can get everybody together to prepare to attack a single creature, which of course is very strong. I do think this one's still a B, but for different reasons. Mountaineering Training, 1 action. This affects all allies. You and all allies can now have a climb speed of 20 feet until the end of your next turn. So you're just giving everybody a climb speed. If you do have to actually climb, even if you don't have this active, you can use your warfare lore to climb, so you get a personal bonus out of this one as well. I don't know how relevant that is, but it's not a bad thing. At first glance, this might seem like it has no combat application. I think it does. I think that you can use this in combat if you're trying to climb walls. This could be nice to have. The problem is, even if you put this in your folio, how often are you going to stay at the beginning of the day, I'm going to take the one that just helps us climb? Unless you know your campaign's all about that, it's unlikely you're ever going to prepare this. And with that in mind, I feel like I need to give it a C. I don't think it's unusable, and in a good campaign it can work out, but I just don't think I'd put this in above at least other preparations most of the time. Naval Training, 1 action. This affects all squad mates, just like Mountaineer in Training. And this time you get a swim speed instead of climb speed. So 20-foot swim speed for everybody until the end of your next turn. You, the commander yourself, can use Warfare Lore to swim, even if you don't have this active going. This is very similar to the last one. I think this is even less likely to come up, and it still can though. So I want to give it a C. It's not a D, because it still could come up, and there's even no actions. They aren't having to use reactions or free actions. This is just, hey, everybody, on your turn you can swim. So that is nice, but it's still so unlikely to be an important thing unless your whole campaign's based around water, in which case this is S tier. Passage of Lines, 1 action, affects all squad mates in the aura. All allies can use a free action to swap places with an adjacent ally. Now this only works if there's space for both of them, so if it was a tiny ally and a large ally and there's not enough space for the large ally to fit, you can't do this. If you are a smaller one, when you go into the space of a larger creature, you can choose where in that space you fit. So this is a straight swap. So, will this come up? It can, sure. But usually if you're swapping spaces like that, it's because you've got somebody who doesn't want to be next to an enemy that is, and somebody who does want to be that isn't, and they didn't manage it on their own turns, and it's your turn, and yes, it can come up. I just don't see this being so valuable that you're going to want to prepare this in the off chance that this does come up and you've got a melee next to your caster and there's an enemy up on your caster. I think there's better ways to get your caster out of trouble, like giving them 3 free steps. I think is actually better than this every single time. So for me, this is a D. I can't imagine wanting to add it to my folio or actually running it because there's just better versions. Yeah, this is a D. Protective Screen. 1 action. This is for 1 ally in your aura. The ally strides toward an ally in your aura. If that ally ends adjacent to a second squad mate, the second squad mate can cast a spell or use a ranged attack without triggering reactions. This lasts until the end of the second squad mate's next turn or until they're no longer adjacent to each other. So basically this is saying I can send my melee squad member over to my caster or ranged fighter, and then at least that caster can feel like they can do something, use spells, use ranged attacks without triggering reactive strikes. The action here is useful not only for trying to help save that second squad mate, but it gets your first squad mate into position where on their turn, they're already right up next to the enemy, which is I think where a lot of the value comes in here. Yes, it's nice to save that second squad mate, but it's also great just repositioning your ally right up next to an enemy. So because it's doing both things, and I think both are useful, but neither is incredible on its own, it really takes both to feel good, I'm going to give it a B. It's a low B, but I'm going to give it a B. If it only did one of the two things, or I thought, both parts weren't valuable, it would drop to a C. But it's barely holding on to that B. All right, we're going to jump into the offensive level 1 tactics now, starting with coordinating maneuvers. This is 1 action. It affects 1 squad mate in your aura. That ally can step as a free action, and if adjacent to an enemy, can attempt to reposition as a reaction. So the step is free, the reaction is for the reposition. This only affects a single ally, but it does provide the ability to not only get up to an enemy, because sometimes enemies will just step away, right? Because that means you have to waste an action to get up to them, but then potentially move them into flanking position. And that's when this gets interesting, is when you can move it into flanking position. If you can't move them into flanking position, repositioning them might be kind of useless. So is it going to come up all the time? No. Would I consider having it in my folio if I had multiple melee combatants? Yeah, I'd consider it. And, boy, this is again on the line of B and C. Only affecting 1 squad mate kind of hurts here. And it is kind of highly situational. But we are still talking level 1 stuff here. And it only is 1 action from you. And a lot of the stronger ones are 2 actions. So it's going to eke into a B because of the low action economy from you, the commander, where you could still get up and do something interesting on your turn as well. But again, really on that edge. Double team. This is 2 actions. It affects 1 squad mate in your aura, and they have to have an enemy within their reach. The ally can attempt to shove or reposition as a free action, and if the enemy ends up next to you, the commander, or another ally other than the one you commanded, because of the successful action, then the second ally or yourself can make a strike as a reaction. This sets up a potentially off-guard reactive strike scenario. But the question is, again, kind of like the last one, how often is that going to happen? What I liked about the last one is it allowed you some level of movement before the reposition. I like that shove is an option here. That's nice, even though the reposition is probably more the value. But this time you have to be in a situation where you've got 2 allies close to each other, and then you are going to reposition this enemy. But if you had allies that were that close to the enemy together already, the chances are they were already flanking it, and this would actually move them out of flanking. So I'm trying to think of how often this will come up. It could be that you run up and this helps you flank with somebody, so it's not like it's not going to come up ever. But I actually feel like this is less likely to be valuable because it doesn't add any move into it at all than the last one, even though they're both very similar in what they're trying to do. Also, this takes 2 actions to do on your part as the commander, which is why I'm giving this one a C. It drops down below the threshold for me of that kind of standard B. So this one's a C, even though the 2 are so very close in what they do. End it. This is 2 actions from you. This affects all squad mates in the aura. You must have more team members alive than enemies, and an enemy must have died, gone to 0 hit points at least, since the end of your last turn. All allies then get to step toward an enemy as a free action, so no reactions here. Any enemy that is within 10 feet of what one of your allies ends up, Must succeed at a will save against your class DC, or become fleeing for 1 round, or frightened 2 plus fleeing for a round if they critically fail to save. So this will, the situation pretty much comes up every battle, right? As long as there's more than one enemy, this will always come up. But does it help you is the question. Yes, it could help once, you've got some minions down, and maybe then you're trying to use this against a boss monster to make it flee, but it's probably going to succeed at save at that point. Or there's just a bunch of minions, you've taken care of a bunch, and now you've just got 2-3 stragglers left, and you just want them to flee, which is great if you don't want to kill things, but assuming you want to still take them out, they were minions, so probably not going to do anything. So this really only comes up against groups of level enemies, so around your level-ish, and once you drop one, then you can do this. But if you've already dropped 1 or 2, and there's maybe, you've got 4 of you playing, and there's only 2 left, you're probably not struggling to take them out anyway. I don't know that you're going to want to take the time to do this, and as the commander, you've probably got better ways just to help your allies take them out anyway. This is another C for me. It just doesn't, it feels like the promise sounds really cool. The execution, the value doesn't live there. Pincer attack. 1 action. All allies can step as a reaction. Any creature that is adjacent after the step is off guard to you, the commander, and all allies that responded to pincer attack until the start of your next turn. Okay, so this affects all squad mates. Check. It's 1 action from you. Check. And it's potentially powerful for setting up a whole lot of off guard. Yes. The only downside is the step is short and uses your whole reaction, but setting up multiple creatures to be off guard is really strong. This is honestly an A for me because it's not just helping melee teammates. It can help your ranged allies. It can help your spellcasters. Remember, you're using a step as a reaction. So even if some of those squad mates, just want to step away from enemies, not toward them, you're still giving them that nice distance, and those could still end up off guard because your other allies could step next to them. So there's a lot of positioning stuff going on here, and it's cheap to use. Solid A. If you have a rogue in your party, this is probably S, because they can just kind of pick their enemy to kill at that point. I do like it. If it was stride, it would be crazy good, but at least step, this is very strong, especially at this level. Reload. 1 action. This is for all squad mates. All allies can reload as a reaction. The question here is, how many crossbow users or gunslingers do you have? If the answer is a lot, this is S tier. None, D tier. This is one of the easiest B tiers I have. Mileage is going to vary based on your team, but reloading, it's just kind of nice to do, especially since a lot of times some of these reloading classes just don't have great reactions. Shields up. This is 1 action. This affects all squad mates in your aura. All allies can raise a shield as a reaction or raise a parry weapon as a reaction, or if it's a spellcaster with the shield cantrip, can use that cantrip as a reaction. This is similar to the reload situation. Do you have multiple shield users? Awesome. This is probably S tier because they probably would love to raise their shield. None? D tier. You're not getting any value out of it. What I think adds some nice value here, though, is adding in casters. It's really important for casters to have 1-action cantrips, and shield, along with guidance, are kind of the 2 really good 1-action spells that are cantrip level. I would say a lot of casters, I recommend them take shield anyway. So having even maybe 1 shield user amongst your marshals and then having a caster or 2 that have shield, already this is great. Upping that AC is solid, not having to use their own actions on their turn to do it. Plus, you as a commander may have your own shield, so you're getting to raise your own shield, which you were going to do for an action anyway. This is really nice. This is an A because it's doing what you already want to do for yourself probably, and helping other people what they wish they could do, but they usually don't have the actions to make use of. Strike hard. 2 actions. This affects 1 squad mate in your aura, and the squad mate makes a strike as a reaction. This is almost always useful. You need at least 1 melee martial squad mate. I'm guessing most teams have that. Be really rare for you not to have one in there. You might not, and then it's useless, but that's all it takes is 1. And maybe there's not going to be one adjacent to an enemy on literally every one of your turns, but it's going to happen often enough. And the 2 actions is a lot, but remember, they're hitting at full chance to hit. So a barbarian, a fighter, a melee ranger, a thaumaturge triggering weaknesses, you know, all of these different martials out there with their different abilities and power with their strikes. It's so easy to use and strong enough that it's going to be useful. This is S tier. It's simple. It's effective. I love it. And it seems like an easy take every time. Tactical Takedown. This is 2 actions, affects 2 squad mates in your aura. Both are going to stride half their speed as a reaction. If both end up adjacent to a single enemy, that enemy must succeed at a reflex save or fall prone. The movement being a reaction isn't ideal, right? But it's not bad either, because you're getting to move half your speed, which means you're repositioning, great. You're getting closer to an enemy. If you're melee, great. It still does take 2 squad mates that want to be potentially melee. It does great things if you've got that, which is very cool. And then you've got them knocking somebody adjacent, then you've got them, you know, knocking somebody prone, but remember the prone is on a reflex save. So there's a bit of a downside. They have to fail at a reflex save, or it's just been the reposition, which on its own isn't bad. It's a good choice with, I think, a positive outcome. Somebody being prone means they're off guard, and there's not a lot of qualifiers on the prone, which makes it also quite good. I think this one for me is another A, but it's an A that's not quite as high. It's close to a B, but I'm going to still give it the edge at this level, level 1, to be an A. All right, time to jump into our expert level at this point. So these are higher level, which means the bar is going to raise. We're going to keep seeing that. These are generally stronger than what we had at level 1, and as we keep going up, as you'll see at Legendary, stuff's just nutty. So these are going to be stronger. Keep that in mind as we get the rankings going here. Alley-oop. This is 1 action from you. It affects 1 squad mate who's holding or wearing a consumable. The squad mate with a consumable, so think potions, elixirs, even activated ammunition will count, can toss it to any other squad mate in the aura as a free action. Now, the receiving squad mate, then, assuming they have a free hand, can catch it using their reaction and immediately load it if it's ammunition, or use it if it's like a potion. So they're going to catch and drink or load all for their reaction. The most likely cases, it seems to me, are potions and elixirs. Healing stuff in particular, but all sorts of potions and elixirs could be used here. Tossing it as a free action is great. Catching it as a reaction using, also strong. But here's where it becomes problematic for me. It requires that you've got both these squad mates, one with access to them. Now, they don't have to be holding the consumable. It can be like on their person, right? When they grab it out. Still, they have to have a free hand to do it. And who they're throwing it to also has to have a free hand to catch it and use it. And that will come up some of the time, but there's plenty of times that won't even be available. So the person you need to throw it to has a sword and shield, or is wielding a 2-hand weapon, and while releasing is a free action, then they have to waste an action on their turn to re-grab their weapon. It's maybe not going to feel great. This is cool for the fact that you have a whole lot of actions here. I mean, this is essentially 4 actions, right? You've got 1 to pull out an elixir from your bag, 2 to potentially throw it if that's even allowed for you. The reaction thing is probably not truly a 3rd action, but drinking is certainly another action, or loading it in. So at least 3 actions used here for the one where somebody's using a free and a reaction. So that's good. The situations are a little harder, I think, to work out. Plus, it's going to be circumstantial on if you even want to use these. I do think it's good. I think it's B level, though. You're going to have to really weigh out how valuable it is to your party. I would definitely say, though, if you've got an alchemist in your party, this is worth preparing. That's solid. Buckle Cut Blitz, 2 actions. This is for 2 squad mates. Both allies use reactions to stride. Any enemy that is adjacent to either of them at any point must make a reflex save against your class DC or become clumsy 1 for 1 round, or clumsy 2 if they crit fail. It's just anywhere along the path that they take. So we're going to see another one like this soon. What makes this seem valuable is the number of enemies that can affect, and also the effect itself. If you get, like, say, 4 enemies between the 2 of you, or between the 2 allies, I should say, that are getting clumsy, that's great. That's a reduce in AC and a reduction in their chance to hit with their ranged weapons or with their finesse weapons. So clumsy is nice, and keep in mind that is a status penalty, which then can combine with off-guard circumstance penalties to really lower AC. And every enemy you want with a lower AC because it increases everybody's chance to hit. I like that. However, if unfortunately you don't have multiple teammates who want to be able to move around the battlefield like that because they're already at an enemy they want to fight, or you don't have that many melee, this is going to be a struggle to use. And if you only got one ally with it for your 2 actions, this isn't going to feel great. This is another B for me at the expert level, and I like this in different ways, but as much as I like the last one, still good, and the status penalty can be painful. Demoralizing Charge, 2 actions for 2 squad mates. Both stride their speed toward an enemy. This can be both to the same enemy or to 2 different enemies. A lot of variety there. For either that ends its stride adjacent to an enemy, they can strike. An enemy successfully struck must make a will save or become frightened 1. And this is frightened 2 on a critical strike. If both attack the same enemy, then the save happens after they both try their strikes, and as long as at least one of them hits, they have to make the save against the frightened here, but they get a -1 penalty to that save. This becomes a -2 penalty if both strikes hit, and this is a -3 if either of those strikes was a critical hit. This is strong. First thing here, the movement is free, essentially, because really the reaction is the strike part of it. This is for 2 allies, for 2 actions of yours. They're getting to move as well, so they get to find who they want to attack. They don't have to go to the same place, or they could, both of which have their own value, but going at the same creature is usually stronger. Then they get that strike, and if they succeed, then they possibly frighten. You don't even need the frighten for this to be good. That's the thing. This is good without the frighten. The frighten on top is just crazy strong. This is S tier. This is fantastic. And I really think that it'd be hard to find a squad that didn't want to utilize this at least a decent amount of the time. And again, the only downside is the fact that there's a save here. But if they're both attacking one creature together, which, let's be honest, is the stronger of the options if they can get there, that penalty means they're probably going to fail. Slip and Sizzle, this is 2 actions for 2 squad mates. One of the squad mates must be adjacent to a foe and the other capable of casting spells. Interesting requirement. The first attempts to trip the adjacent enemy, and that's as a reaction. If successful, the second squad mate can cast a spell that deals damage and requires 1 or 2 actions. This spell is either targeted or can be an area. The spell is cast as a reaction, and again, that enemy that fell prone has to be either the target or in the area of the spell. If the caster uses a spell that isn't a cantrip, meaning a focus spell uses a spell slot, then on their next turn, they're going to be slowed 1 and not gain another reaction. Keep that in mind. This is interesting and frustrating at the same time. So first of all, you've got the restriction of, all right, it has to be a melee combatant and a spellcaster. That's not a problem. You know not to take this if you don't have both of those in your squad. Simple, right? If you do, okay, you're setting this up to probably work out well. Being able to trip somebody is good. Making them off guard, yeah, that's good. Being able to cast a spell at the same time, that's good. So these are both things you want to do. And the melee squad mate does have to be athletics focused to really gain the most out of this. But it's not the end of the world if they're not. They have to have the ability to trip those. That means a free hand or a weapon that has trip or something. But if you're taking this, hopefully you figure that out as a group, but it's something to think about. And then cantrips are even strong here, but spell slot spells, of course, are stronger, and it just has to deal damage. It's not that it only deals damage, it can have other effects. So the spells could be really good. The thing that really hurts it here, and what tears it down from an A to a B for me, is the fact that if you want to use a good spell, your spellcaster is going to be slowed 1 next turn, which could be crippling potentially, especially if they're sustaining something, and they don't gain another reaction for you to be able to work with them again. Now, you can still give them your free reaction next turn, but they just don't gain one of their own. This is a B, but I do like it, and it's close to an A. If you have the right setup, probably really consider this one. Stupefying Raid, 2 actions for 2 squad mates. We've kind of had a theme here with the 2 squad mate thing in Expert. This is very much like Buckle Cut Blitz, only it's for Stupefy. So 2 squad mates running about, trying to stupefy things that they come across, right? They make a save. If they fail, stupefied 1. If they crit fail, stupefied 2. Very same setup. Here's the difference. Stupefy is a different beast to Clumsy. Stupefy, you're going to take advantage of by having spellcasters that can trigger will saves. That's the most common way. Now, obviously, there's will save stuff going on here, right? Just with the commander. So there's other ways, there's plenty of other things that can trigger it, but it's going to be largely that. And while that's good against any enemy to be able to reduce their will saves, you have to have somebody who can take advantage of those downed will saves, whereas Clumsy, any attack is taking advantage of the fact that they have a lower AC. And then the other side of being stupefied is the reduction of your own casting stuff. So your attack modifier with spells and your will save, and your save DC as a caster is going to go down when you are stupefied, so that helps too. So this is a good way to do it against casters. But keep in mind, this does give them a will save, and casters are going to succeed that will save. So it's not even hurting the ones you want to hurt the most, which is why this drops to a C for me, even though it's the same idea, and there's still the potential to affect a lot of creatures. I just don't know that this is as valuable as reducing their AC with Clumsy. Take the high ground. This is one action. It affects one squad mate. Your squad mate strides toward an ally as a free action. If that squad mate makes it to the adjacent squad mate, the first squad mate then can leap horizontally 25 feet or 15 feet vertically as a reaction. And this goes up to 40 feet and 25 feet if the commander is legendary in Warfare lore, so meaning if you're level 15. This is good movement. I just don't know how often this is necessary, especially at this level. Having this movement and the ability to jump is very cool here, don't get me wrong, but it's just that movement, and it's for one ally. Honestly, for most cases, in most battles, I think you're better off with some of the level 1 mobility stuff, which is why this is a C for me. It's not unusable, and it can be really helpful in certain situations, especially clearing great distances that are dangerous. But as far as expert tactics go, it just doesn't hold up to really the others very well. And we are up to Master, which means we have 6 here and 6 at Legendary, and then we will be done. I know it's a long haul. If you're still with me, awesome. I appreciate it. The bigger they are. This is one action, affects one squad mate. You choose a squad mate that's adjacent to a creature that can then attempt to shove, reposition, or trip a creature they are adjacent to as a reaction. Any ally adjacent to that same creature or adjacent to the squad mate that you're giving the command to can use their reactions to aid this, which means that for every ally, not only is there going to be a +1 bonus to the attempt to trip or reposition or shove, but it can target a creature one size larger. This feels out of place to me. The one action to trigger a trip or shove or reposition, that's good. But having the other allies use their reactions to just increase the chance of it happening, I can't imagine a lot of squad mates wanting to use their reaction for that, because if they're all right around the same creature, they're probably got better uses for their reaction at this level than this. And yes, you can also increase the size affected, but if you've got somebody who's focused on these type of effects, these type of athletics-based grapple-style effects, they already took Titan Wrestler. They don't need this. They can already, hit larger creatures with their effects. At which point, that's wasted, plus your allies aren't going to want to do it other than the one who's going to want to take the action, at which point you're spending one action to give them one action to reaction do one of these things. We already have other ways to let you do that. Taking this as a master just doesn't make sense to me. So starting off master is not great, but I'm going to throw this at a D. I would never add this to my folio. Mirrored Wall. This is 2 actions. It can only be used once every 10 minutes and affects all allies, but at least one has to have bright light shining upon them. All allies can raise a shield or use the shield cantrip as a reaction. Then you choose one of the shield raised squad mates, and this one has to have bright light on them. And then you target one enemy within 60 feet. The squad mate reflects the light off their shield or shield cantrip at the enemy. The enemy makes a fortitude save, becoming blinded for a turn, plus 3 rounds of dazzled on a crit fail. For each ally with a shield raised, the enemy takes a -1 to its save, down to a maximum of a -4 to its save. This is just taking something that characters with shields already want to do and letting them do it even better. So we talked about earlier this way for everybody to raise a shield. That's really valuable on its own. This is adding blinding on top of that, which is just kind of, gravy on top of something you already wanted to do. Yes, it takes 2 actions from you to do this. But again, this is just great for everybody who's trying to take advantage of that. Does it add a ton on top of what you were already doing at level 1? Normally I would say no, but the blinded effect is brutal. Blinded for a round means everybody's concealed to them, and basically they're going to be off guard to everybody. they're not going to be able to make attacks. If you can land it, this is a really terrible condition, which is why I'm going to bump it up to an A. And I think that if you have shields in your party, or spellcaster with shield cantrip, this is really nice. But there are hurdles. So I can see why people probably fight me on this one and call it lower than an A. Piranha Assault. This is one action, once per 10 minutes. This affects all allies, and you choose one enemy within your aura. For the next minute, each ally that responds to this command right here, when attacking that enemy, ignores resistance to their attacks by the enemy. So like they're resistant 6 to slashing damage. They can ignore up to your level worth, and at this point, you're plenty high level to ignore that 6. So this is a great way to ignore all that resistance. Nobody's giving up actions. You're only giving up one. Nobody's got a reaction they have to use. That's all good stuff. The only problem here is, are there going to be enemies with resistances of the same type as the damage your allies do? Resistances definitely happen. It's not uncommon, but boy, it could really vary quite a bit here. I think this is good. I like this. I would probably put it in a folio, likely, but I wouldn't use it all the time. Right? I wouldn't always be prepared unless I knew I was going at something that this would come up with. So that's a B to me, but it's a really solid B, and I do like it as a good option to have. Pop, Drop, and Lock. This is 2 actions, once every 10 minutes, again. You choose up to 3 allies in your aura. The allies you signal have to have the same enemy in their reach. Then they each strike, trip, or grapple the creature in whatever order. Each of the actions can only be performed by one ally. So 1 trips, 1 grapples, 1 strikes, right? And it's up to. So are you going to get 3 allies all around the same creature? Maybe not. 2 flanking a creature together? Now that's way more likely. And even for affecting 2 allies, this is still really good because they get to choose the order it goes in. One of the two of them is probably capable of tripping or grappling, either using a weapon or just free-handedly doing it. And both are good. They both are good in different ways. Then, obviously, one of them is going to be able to strike. As long as you have 2 melee martial allies, this is just solid. And even without that, even if you just have 1 ally you're using, this is just, in a way, a straight-up upgrade to strike hard. Minus the whole 10-minute downtime thing. But other than that, it's just good. And it's, we're higher level now, we're master, so I'm going to call this an A, but it's a really solid A. And in the right team, this could easily be S tier. If you do have 3 melee marshals out there always ganging up on an enemy, oh, this is gross. Ready, Aim, Fire. 2 actions. Again, up to 3 squad mates, and once per 10 minutes. Allies can reload as a free action, then use their reaction to strike at a target you and they can see. If an ally has a cantrip with a range of 30 feet or more, they can use that instead. All this has to target the same target. This is a ranged version of the last one, pretty much, only it's straight up strikes, but you're at range, so that's what you're trying to do. This even works for gun users, right? Because you get the reload for free, and most of the time you're trying to take out a single enemy at a time, right? That is the strongest way to reduce enemies from the battlefield. And because nobody has to worry about their distance as much, right? The last one you had to have allies right around a creature. This you just have to have people who have ranged attacks. That's it. That's why this one to me is the S, while the last one was the A, because this is way more likely to come up where 3 can actually take advantage of it. I love that they added spellcasters into this one because that really does put it all together. Yeah, solid, fantastic. Roaring Charge, 2 actions, once per 10 minutes. We like that. This is for all squad mates. All squad mates stride up to twice their speed. Any creature within 10 feet of a squad mate after the movement has to make a will save. On a success, they're frightened 1. On a fail, frightened 2. And on a crit fail, they are frightened 3 and fleeing. The latter half of these master tactics have, they really changed the bar here. The fact that on a successful save, they're still going to get frightened 1 makes this good. Then you've got the other frightened levels, which is great. You're spending 2 actions, and yes, you've got people moving all of their speed. The chance of all enemies ending up within 10 feet of somebody is actually probably pretty good. So you're probably frightening, who knows, you could be frightening up to 5, 6 creatures. It's not very useful necessarily if you just have like 1 enemy out there, but that's probably not going to be common. Even if you've got 2 or 3 enemies, this is a great way to reposition the whole team, get them in advantageous positions. The 10-foot space between enemy and ally means even ranged can get closer and still not necessarily put themselves in a bad place. This is an A. This feels really good, frightened solid, a nice way to just let everybody get value out of this one command. And finally, we are on the legendary. Thank goodness this has been a long video. So again, bar raised once more, and we are in the once per day category. So expect to hear a lot of once per day. Starting with Bloody Guillotine, 2 actions from you, once per day. You choose 3 squad mates. The squad mates stride half their distance all toward the same enemy as a free action. Each ally that gets in range can trip or strike as a reaction. If the enemy is prone and hit with a strike, the creature must succeed at a fortitude save or die. Now this does have the incapacitation and death traits. All enemies that witness this, assuming that person dies, have to make a will save or become sickened 1 for a round, or on a crit fail, sickened 2 for a round. This sounds incredible when you just quickly run through it, until you stop to think about it. Is there potential and fun here? Absolutely. This is really cool and one of the most visually evocative ones out there. But it's got some challenges. Once per day, I'm not going to call it as a challenge because that's going to be all up and down these legendary ones. A challenge, but they all share it, so don't worry about that. The problem is that the outcomes are in sequence, making them less likely. So first we've got the trips and strikes. So one of your allies has to want to trip while the others are striking, and you have to at least have 2 involved for this to even make sense, because with only 1, unless they're running at a prone enemy, which seems unlikely, they're not going to get the full effect of this. So you have to have at least 1 to trip and 1 to strike. The trip then has to succeed, because if you strike and it's not already on the ground, you can't potentially trigger the fortitude save. Then you've got the fortitude save, which is usually pretty strong for creatures. Okay, so now they got a fortitude save, they have to fail that to die, but it has incapacitation trait and death trait. Both matter because incapacitation means you better not be targeting anybody, higher level than you, and the death trait means, well, there's a bunch of creatures that are immune to stuff with the death trait. So all of that coming together, and then you've got the will saves after that. So even if you pull that off, the chance of sickening creatures, oh boy, just caveat after caveat after caveat. It sounds cool, but for me, this is a C just because it's not going to pay off the way you think it will. Cry Havoc. This is 3 actions, once per day, for all squad mates. So all squad mates stride twice as a reaction. Any enemy that ends adjacent to an ally, meaning after they stride, the enemy's adjacent to them, at least the joined in on this, has to make a basic fortitude save against your class DC, and on a fail, they're going to take 2d6 bludgeoning and 2d6 sonics for each squad mate that joined in on this whole tactic. On a crit fail, they're going to take double damage, but also they're going to become deafened for a round. The damage here is okay. It's not amazing, but it also depends on your squad, right? If you've got 5 people in your squad and you all do it, okay, we're talking about 10d6 of each. Suddenly that's pretty good damage. But if it's going to be 3 squad mates that are going to join in, that's going to feel kind of weak. If you're surrounded by minions, this is also going to be solid because you got a lot to hit. If there's only a couple minions, this is going to feel less good. The only reason I like this a lot more than the last one is because there's easier to get value from it. Again, this was a basic fort save, so they're going to even take half damage on a save. So I do like it, and I think this runs a nice middle ground, giving it a B, but I'm not going to go higher than a B here. Executioner's Volley. This is 2 actions, once per day, for all allies. All squad mates make ranged attacks or cantrip attacks against a single target. You combine all the damage before dealing it, so that resistances and weaknesses only get triggered once. And if the creature you all targeted together dies, and there are other enemies in the aura, all enemies in your aura must succeed at a will save or become frightened 2. Okay, so this is a better setup than Bloody Guillotine because it doesn't require adjacency, and the kill is more natural, right? We don't have this straight kill assuming incapacitation and a save and all that. This is just, you did enough damage to kill it. You can target something that you know is going to have less hit points, like a minion, to almost guarantee a kill if you have enough people who can use ranged attacks, which is the only reason you would take this. So you have to have a squad with a lot of ranged attacks to do it, and then you could potentially take it out. Yes, there is another save here, so there is kind of a fall-on effect. You might not get that frightened 2, but it does affect potentially everybody in the aura, and it, is a will save for a frightened 2, which frightened 2 is a pretty dire effect. Because the effect is strong, this is, I think, much stronger than the Bloody Guillotine, which I'm going to push this up to an A because I think it's far more likely to come together as something that you can pull off as a team and have effect from. Insta Ballista, 2 actions, once per day, all allies. When you prepare this, all allies are going to get pieces of this makeshift ballista together. And then when you use this, they're all going to have a free action to stride. And for all of them that would end within 10 feet of each other, so you kind of have like a 10-foot huddle going on, you get to put together parts of the ballista, and you get to choose a target within 200 feet, which is really far. This deals 10d12 damage with an attack roll against that creature, and depending on how many squad mates were able to come together to help the ballista, you get to add up to a +4 to your attack roll, so +1 for each squad mate, making this a pretty decent chance to hit. And as far as a proficiency, it is your proficiency with martial weapons, so that's pretty good at this point. This is going to feel pretty solid, and that is a decently hard hit. Here's the problem. It's one target you're going against, and the actual average damage here is about 65, which isn't like, that's not a small number. But keep in mind, at this point, we are really high level, right? These are legendary. We are extremely high level. We are end game. I just don't think it's enough. I just don't feel like, when you're saying all of you come together to do this, you don't have any flat bonuses on top. There's no like straight +12 damage or something to make this consistently stronger. And it's everybody now having to huddle up, which at this level could be really dangerous, because everybody coming together might mean, and now we're going to get AoE down. It's very cool. I would take it just because it sounds fun, and I'd probably use it for that reason alone. But as far as ranking it from a power level and a rationale, I have to give it a C, but I still love it. Sanguine Revitalization. This is 2 actions, once per day. This is for all allies. You choose one target, squad mates with melee slashing or piercing weapons, or unarmed slashing or piercing strikes. They stride up to half their distance as a free action, and if they end adjacent to the target, they strike. If the target is hit, it must make a fort save or take 10 persistent bleed damage. The save that they get has a debuff depending on the number of squad mates involved, down to as low as possibly -4. If this happens, meaning the bleeding happens, each squad mate within 20 feet of this target then gets healed 10d6 hit points. Boy, there's a lot of caveats here again. So forcing just piercing and slashing is weird. Not the end of the world, because that's a lot of the weapons, but it's weird. And then this only works against enemies that can bleed, which as you get a higher level, that number's going to go down. And then the melee squad mates have to be fairly close together, again, to get a lot out of this, because they're going to get a single half-distance stride, which doesn't give them a lot to work with. Then there's the save you get against the bleeding, if you even can bleed. And even if that does happen, so you've caused the persistent bleeding, now you get to heal your allies, which is only helpful if they're actually hurt. It's decent healing, but there's just a lot that has to line up for this to feel like the choice above other choices. I don't think I would ever fit this into my folio. I'd much rather take the other legendary action that's focused on melee combatants than this one. This just doesn't do it for me. You'd feel like you'd have to wait till till all your melee allies are hurt to even want to use this, and then target an enemy that bleeds and saves. And I don't like it. I'm guessing other people like it a lot more than me. It's a D. And finally, we are on our last tactic, Valkyrie's Charge. For 3 actions, once per day. This is all allies. You and all allies regain 80 hit points, including those who are unconscious but not dead. If you were unconscious, you get raised up, you can stand up and pick up dropped weapons as a free action. Then, after all that healing, all of you can stride twice as a free action, and if you end your movement within the reach of an enemy, you can strike as a reaction. There is a lot going on here that does not take a lot of saves or caveats or anything. Yes, you're going to need some allies to be hurt to use this. You would only use this when you've got allies hurt. Assuming you've got allies hurt, or even one downed, this is probably worth it. Boom, people are back in the fight. They reposition to where they need to be. You don't need to move up to enemies to make this valuable. Casters running the opposite direction, they got a lot of value out of this too. They're in the position they want to be. You took a bleak situation where the team was hurt, somebody was downed, whatever it may be, and you completely reversed it for 1 turn and 3 actions, and put everybody where they want to be for their next round. This is, in my opinion, the most impactful tactic for the entire class. This is an S for me. I would take it pretty much every time if I got to this level. And we're finally done. Hooray, that was a lot of tactics. If you stuck with me to the end, you are amazing. This was a lot to listen to. Now you can go and tell me how wrong I was about everything I said. What do you think? Do you like them or dislike them more than me? Probably. Give me your thoughts in the comments. And once again, as always, adventure on.